Is it something that you continually struggle with, or is it something that you just deal with, or how does that work for you?
That's a good question. Let me answer it two parts. First, the Army has had a huge problem with post-traumatic stress.
Right.
That is very clear that it is an issue that's happened time and time again, has been, I think, most easily recognized by the number of suicides that have happened.
Right.
Those who do not commit suicide are not necessarily any worse off. It's just that they suffer in silence all the time, and that's an issue. And as for me, the stress of what happened, frankly, it's always going to be there a bit.
Right.
You always think back. You think you could have done things differently or better. Even in those situations, you wonder about, what could have been, what might have been, and obviously other folks who were killed there over the time I was there, and I was, I was fine. And so you always wonder about that. I think, frankly, the biggest stress comes from dealing with folks who really don't care about the war. It's
Yeah.
really, I think, sad that people come back here and they have, even now in the Army, there's a very clear trend where I think the Army's trying to make improvements, but there are those who just don't care about the service, the stress people go through, and they are more than happy to add to it. And so this is one of those things I think the Army is slowly changing, but not as quickly as it should.
Right.
That's the biggest thing is when people go through that, they come back and they face the real world, and people are totally, I guess, unsympathetic to the issues relating to that. And I think that's where there needs to be some changes made, and there are some changes being made.
Well, it's as if. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, you go ahead. Well, it's as if in Washington there's just such a culture of corruption that Kissinger talks about soldiers being cannon fodder. There's
Right.
apparently no concern about the use of depleted uranium, stuff like that on the troops. And so that and I have so many friends that signed up and have come back with problems as well. And so there just seems to be little concern. We read too about the veterans benefits being taken away, trouble getting benefits, stuff like that. So it's as if there's just once you turn to the dark side, it's just a completely internally corrosive. In other words, it just destroys the whole thing. But it doesn't just get.
Oh, absolutely.
The whole thing rots from the head down.
Yeah, I agree. That's what the Japanese saying. That the head of the fish rots from the. The fish head rots from the head. I think
Right.
That's where a lot of the problems we face today. And the other thing is, there's a presumption of basically disregard. I guess not presumption. I think disregard's a better word. Disregard for anything relating to what's right and best, and politics, and the presumption of almost this imperial Washington rules the day. I see
Yeah.
that every day.
Right.
I see this imperial attitude from a lot of the policymakers, even now, and I'm hoping that this will change a little bit with the incoming Republican House.
Right.
But and I think, frankly, this TSA groping thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Right.
Due to this arrogance, I got to be honest with you. I think the whole groping thing is just loony. I am all for the idea, and I'll be blunt, the idea of profiling people.
I agree.
Of looking for certain trends, certain people.
Absolutely.
There's certain behaviors. It doesn't matter who you are. That tend to telegraph what you're doing. And the Israelis have been very good about setting up a process where people have to think. They talk to you.
Right.
They will find out what you're doing, where you've been. And I think, if the questioning is done correctly, they'll let you go. It's not like they're going to hold you or anything. But the idea of holding everybody, to make everybody the same, everybody from your 8-year-old grandma to a 5-year-old kid, all have to be treated as threats, to me is total lunacy.
Right. Yeah.
And this is beyond the pale, and it doesn't work. Anyway, but this is a symptom of this larger imperial
Yes.
idea that Washington knows best, and they're going to tell you what to do no matter what.
Right. And would you go far as to say that it's actually, is it just sort of a corrupt thing where guys who run the body scanner companies are having them put in, or is it even a further level of sort of dehumanization?
No, I think there's some politics there relating to who makes money off of it. Absolutely. But I think beyond that, there's a culture of the attitude of Washington.
Right.
Where I've observed some things over the last 2 days where it's been made very clear to me that, for example, certain folks just don't care about me and my attitude and the fact of speaking out, and it's folks out there are going to do some things to try to come after me at some point in time related to the fact that certain folks in D.C. don't like being criticized.
Sure.
So I think it comes down to any criticism, no matter how well-meaning, no matter how detailed or factual, is just not accepted by the administration or more importantly, the bureaucracy.
Right.
There's really three parts in this country. There's the Democrats, Republicans, and then there's the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is that which goes from administration to administration and really does tend to begin to take on a life of its own. So when you combine, this almost imperial culture that exists within the government with leadership who really wants to basically tell people what they should do and really not do what's necessary to do the right thing, to lump everybody together, I think it's just this whole mishmash adds up to, like as you mentioned, kind of this overall corruption, this culture of corruption. And one of the first lessons I had to go through when I was a whistleblower back in 2005, I learned that, and this is a sad truth, but the truth is this: the truth in Washington D.C. is negotiable, and it just shouldn't be that way.
Right. Well, and the other thing about your book is that you're not a war hawk. I mean, you're talking about a solution to what's going on in Afghanistan, and in the epilogue you give realistic solutions for somebody who's been there firsthand, and so it's not just some bureaucrat in a cubicle in Washington thousands of miles away. I mean, you've been there, and so you have I would think a much better analysis of what's a realistic solution than just perpetuating the conflict.
Well, we've got to do something to mitigate. I mean, your point is well taken, and this is this is the issue as I see it. We have some of the best and brightest of our youth dying over there right now,
right,
with no real hope of making a long-term impact. I'm not saying we can't win militarily. We will go in and we'll do what we can.
Right.
I think we do it very well. The problem is holding and building. And I was actually on Fox News today at 12:30 talking about this very issue, by the fact that there's an appearance that there's a disregard for the long-term consequences of what we're doing there. And this is how I would term that. The bottom line is this: that we have two organizations, two groups essentially right now, the Karzai administration and the Taliban.
Right.
And it's like the Hatfields and McCoys. These folks, tribes have fought each other for 2,000 years, long before the Muslim faith or the radical Muslim elements ever came there.
Right.
And so we're ignoring the obvious by the fact that we recognize this is an issue. And the other thing is the real threat, as everybody keeps talking about, but no one seems willing to do anything about, is in Pakistan. And despite the agreement that the Pakistani army would jump in earlier this year so there could be a cohesive effort made on both sides of the border to stop the Taliban, they're now talking about another 6-month delay. So we're talking about 18 months after they promised to do something, they've not done it.
Right.
So you've got to ask yourself whose side they're on, what the $7 billion a year we're giving them is buying us, and ultimately what is guaranteeing that they're going to remain stable as a power by the fact that they have nuclear weapons. So we've got to do something to win this. And I'm arguing there are things we can do to win this.
Right.
It's going to take some hard decisions. You have to have a great deal of fortitude. And instead of looking at how we lost Vietnam, we need to look at how we won World War II. And I think, frankly, there's some lessons there that we could use to bring, diplomatic and military things together to win.
Right. Well, you even mentioned the fact that the Soviets have been there, the British have been there, and they seem to have been doing the same types of things that we're doing, and they did not fare well there. So, you bring that out very well. Do you think that can we talk about Able Danger, because you've got a chapter in there about that that's really fascinating too, as well as the chapter as a great title, They're Really Pissed at You. That's a good title chapter. Tell us why they were really pissed at you. Not everybody who's going to be one of my readers. I have a lot of nerdy literature, philosophy types.
Well,
they're not going to know about Able, so tell us about that.
Well, first off, look, I've been told by a lot of friends that people either love me or hate me, and I've accepted that a long time ago, because I tend to push the envelope. I tend to
me too.
To not be demure. I tend to try to mix things up. I'm not one who's going to sit back. I want to be part of it. I want to see things change, especially if things are wrong. So I've always been a incendiary figure within, for my past 25 years. I've that incendiary figure, whatever you want to call it, has served me well at times, because it has allowed me to get in positions to make things happen.
Right.
And one of the grand course, of being an intelligence officer, you can never talk about those operations which are most successful. So, with
Right.
that said, um, the whole metaphor of they're really pissed at you was the fact that during the tour in Afghanistan, I blew the whistle on an operation known as Able Danger.
Right.
Able Danger was an offensive operation which was designed to target Al-Qaeda globally by the Special Operations Command a full 2 years before 9/11. That is to say that we started looking at Al-Qaeda as a threat in 1999. And during that 2-year run-up to 2001, there was a lot of work done to define and basically map Al-Qaeda as an organization.
Right.
Anytime you have a military operation, you want to understand the threat in great detail. With Al-Qaeda, the problem was they really don't have a country they sit in. They're a global threat. So we had to do something called data mining and some other advanced using some other advanced technology to help kind of understand their social networks.
Right.
So this was way ahead of its time. I mean, obviously everybody uses Facebook now, but we were actually trying to figure out their social networks, trying to figure out who talked to who, and their internet context was the basis for doing that.
Right.
So, and again, just keep in mind, this is 1999. This is
Right.
full, 11 years ago now. And so what happened was we identified Mohammed Atta and at least 2 of the 3 cells which conducted the 9/11 attacks. Let me be very clear for your listeners. We didn't know what they were doing. We just recognized they were here.
The presence, right.
And they basically, Al-Qaeda had cells operating within the United States. So that was the big headline. We didn't have the other pieces of the puzzle to tell us about the aviation training and some of the other things. We just recognized the fact that these folks were operating in cells and they were here.
Right.
And that is the crux of the information which I attempted to have Special Operations Command pass to the FBI. And ultimately it was not passed for some political decisions of lawyers at DOD, and the rest is obviously history. So the big thing about the book, the big reveal in the book is my meeting at Bagram in 2003, obviously
right.
well after 9/11, and my discussion with Dr. Philip Zelikow, the staff director of the 9/11 Commission. So that is the issue which was presented to me, the option of briefing these folks, so I obtained permission from the Army to do that. And in the end, obviously it was not well received, and certain folks at the Defense Intelligence Agency chose to come after me and make sure that I was to be ostracized and fired from the intelligence community for doing this sort of thing. So
right.
That was the bottom line there.
Well, and it brings to mind the situation with Sybil Edmonds, which was roughly around that same time with the FBI when she
right.
Stumbled on similar types of info, and apparently nothing was done.
Yeah, I know Sybil, and yes, that is factually correct. That she did have similar things, and I think in some ways her information was far more compelling by the fact that she was a linguist and she was translating information that was actually intercepted from sources. So yeah, I do, and it was during the same time frame where I think it's very clear that a lot more could have been done. And I've argued several times. I actually testified to this fact in 2006 in front of Congress.
Right.
That I do believe the 9/11 attacks were preventable, and easily so, had all the pieces been brought together. And it wasn't, frankly, it was not a policy. It was not an intelligence problem. It was a policy problem.
Right.
Policies of that day prevented people from talking adequately and quickly about information which was available. I argue that fundamentally we have not changed. Things are not that much better. As a matter of fact, I think in some ways they're worse because we have not fixed the problem. We just added layers of bureaucracy to it, and I think that's where
exactly.
we're at now.
Right. And that's I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that a large state is bad per se, but one of the problems with a large state is bureaucracy. I mean, that's historically the case with civilizations. Writers talk about this, and that's one of the best things about your book is that, again, you're coming at this from a realistic perspective and talking about how things are, not progressing because of the fact of just overweighted bureaucracy everywhere.
Right.
I find it you have so many interesting, I guess, pop culture references that I find really fascinating. You talk about not just Star Wars, but you mentioned Mr. White, Mr. Gray, Mr. Pink. Now, is that a Quentin Tarantino reference?